is making a comeback.
As we sally on down the road toward what is likely to be a contentious election 2020, there appears to be no end in sight to the rancor between the Democrats and the Republicans. As well, a breathtaking display of ineptitude and incompetence by Democratic Party officials in Iowa is now front and center. Their inability to count an estimated 75,000 votes has many Americans wondering how in the world these people could possibly run a national health care program, or anything else for that matter. While we do not endorse candidates, Liberty Nation offers political analysis for Americans to reflect on as they make their choice for president. So let's get right to our expert panel. Joining me today for some expert political analysis is Sarah Cowgill, national correspondent for Liberty Nation. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you for having me, Lisa.
My better half, Washington political columnist Tim Donner.
Hi, Lisa.
And none other than our chief political correspondent, Graham J. Noble. Welcome, Graham.
Good afternoon.
Okay, well, I'm doubling down on being confused because it's been such a breathless week. Impeachment, Iowa, State of the Union, so much going on, so little time. I'm going to start with the impeachment. Sarah, your thoughts?
It came down exactly as I assumed it would, and I think everybody in the heartland had the same reaction. It is what it is. It's time to move on, and that's not going to happen. So now they're after, they hope that there will be some kind of retribution.
All right, Tim. So Romney, I guess, goes down in the annals of history, or maybe it's Ripley's, believe it or not, I'm not sure. Anyway, he became the first senator to vote for conviction of a president in his own party. What price is he likely to pay here?
I think he's going to pay a very steep price, not electorally, because the people of Utah, it's the most Republican state in the nation. He has a pretty long leash to do this, and he was only elected to the Senate a couple of years ago, so he won't face the voters again for 4 years. I suspect that made him a lot more courageous than he might have been otherwise. But I think he enjoys the fact that he's being a rebel. He enjoys following in the footsteps of John McCain, two failed nominees who are just, who have acted with bright green envy that Trump was the one that made it to the White House, not them.
Well, I don't know if it's Romney revenge or if it's sour grapes or if it's just, trying to be sort of above it all. What do you think, Graham?
It is hard to make out. I think it's a combination of all of those things. I noticed that Senator Romney did actually vote not guilty on the second article, which was obstruction of Congress. And I'm wondering to myself whether that was because it was such a ridiculous accusation that even Romney couldn't bring himself to convict the president on that one. Or was it that he wanted to vote guilty on one of them and not guilty on the other, so that he could always, depending on which audience he's in front of, he can say, well, I stood up to the president. And on the other hand, he can say, well, I did vote not guilty.
Yes.
Right. Tim, let's jump over quickly to Doug Jones and Kirsten Sinema, Democrats up for re-election who voted to convict. What do you make of that?
Well, Doug Jones not only voted to convict, but he got up and gave an impassioned speech. He's the guy that knocked off Roy Moore, the infamous Roy Moore, in a Senate race in Alabama 2 years ago. A Democrat getting elected in Alabama is a very unusual thing. And I suspect after he decided to not only vote to convict the president, but give an impassioned speech, that we can expect Jeff Sessions, his opponent, to be returning to the Senate in November, because voting to convict the president in Alabama is a certain formula for defeat. Kirsten Sinema in Arizona, a little bit more complicated there because Arizona is not as Republican, of course, as Alabama is, but I can't think that it's going to help her much. But she evidently decided it was better to go along with the party than make enemies of them, that outweighed whatever negative effect it might have with the people of Arizona.
All right, Sarah, you spent a boatload of time in Arizona. What's your take on Kirsten Sinema?
She's really an independent. I don't believe she falls into party lines whatsoever. she didn't wear white to the State of the Union. She has a tendency to be a little bit of a wild card. And I don't think she's going to be in trouble with anybody. And I don't think she's going to get, I think she'll be reelected handily just because she is more of a wild card than she is a party person. I think she felt safe coming from a sort of Republican state like Arizona and voting against President Trump simply because she's sided with him on so many other things, other issues, other bills, and I don't think she's going to face any backlash whatsoever.
All right, Graham, we're going to quickly move over to Iowa. My goodness, I'm sort of speechless here. We can't seem to tally 75,000 votes. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, it was just, I think the days of the storied Iowa caucuses are about done after this year. I can imagine that in the next Democratic presidential primary, they're going to have to do something else about that, because it's always been a little strange, but this time it was just a complete circus. I mean, and even the Democrats, I think even Joe Biden actually said, and he rarely says anything that makes any sense, but he actually said something along the lines of, we took a punch to the gut on this one, and he basically meant in terms of the entire process being a complete and utter failure. And this is the party who wants to tell us that they should actually be given the power to run our entire lives, and they can't organize a caucus. I mean,
all right, Sarah. You've actually been to Iowa. You've attended the caucuses. Wow. What's your take on what happened this time around? Admittedly, technology got in the way, and maybe it'll all come down to the Russians again. I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I think it's going to come down to Hillary Clinton's people, but that's just me being a conspiracy theorist. It was an absolute cluster. It still is. So it's not even really settled yet. Iowa, it's a weird process. If you've ever been to a caucus, you kind of hole up behind these little, outlined cages. When you pick your guy, and the independents walk around and try to get lured into it. It's a weird process, and I would imagine, as Graham said, they're going to stop that after this year. They'll probably go to a primary, and when they do that, they won't be important anymore because they won't be able to be first.
Tim, you think this whole thing in Iowa is just going to blow over and really not make a heck of a big difference in the long run?
Well, the baggage that the Democratic Party has been carrying all year is hatred and socialism. They're driven by so much hatred of President Trump and by the preferences of several of their candidates for full-on socialist policies. But we didn't think that we would be able to add gross incompetence to the list of particulars for the Democrats, but this is gross incompetence. They're not going to overcome the lingering sense of incompetence, but also Joe Biden ought to be grateful that they're incompetent because he had a disastrous fourth place finish. He may be finished, but I think it will be a slow motion decline. And for Amy Klobuchar, it looks like the end of the line. So it'll be the three killer bees from here on in: Biden, Buttigieg, and Bernie. It's going to be between those three.
All right, Graham, moving away from Iowa and on to the State of the Union 2020. A lot has happened this week. I mean, it's really been hard to cover for Liberty Nation, considering, we're a fairly small, but I particularly think excellent staff. But, last night, so much happened from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you had the chant of 4 more years at the beginning there. And then, of course, you had the tearing up of the speech at the end, which I guess we've figured out might actually be a breaking of a federal law, which that'll be interesting. It was just crazy. And then, of course, Trump's very astute pick of guests to be there up in the gallery, and each of those guests who was mentioned by him and their stories were told whilst each of them was certainly deserving of that, they were each there for a reason, because each one of them was there to make a political point. So
right.
that was, the whole thing was fascinating.
Yeah, and you know, Sarah, I found the whole thing interesting. It was like the president was he took the Reagan-esque approach and then doubled down on it, and sort of told the story of his entire administration, or the story of America, through individuals, one after another. They each had a different topic. They each had a different suffering or a different hero. Or I found it quite personal and moving.
I don't know who Trump's speechwriter is, but they deserve a raise. That was out of the park. And I mean, it was very strategic, but it was very good too. I mean, he delivered it well, and he focused on, a girl that was born 21 weeks, trying to point out late-term abortion is horrifying. Yeah, he went one by one and made it nearly impossible for the Democrats to sit there with their arms crossed and glower. They needed to stand up. And he just pointed out all the positives in his administration so far and where he's trying to go with it. And I again, that speechwriter, oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, Pelosi certainly did come off as petulant and petty, but Tim, did you find the president's State of the Union stately? I mean, I don't ever remember hearing USA chant in a State of the Union. I mean, maybe it's happened, but and I've watched a lot of them, but I don't remember that.
Well, I'll tell you who his speechwriter is. It's a guy named Stephen Miller, and he's probably the single most talented man in the entire Trump administration outside of the president himself. He's in charge of all the communications via speech. He's the one that wrote this, and he may be the new Ted Sorensen, who is, of course, the famous speechwriter for JFK.
All right, lightning round coming out of this week. Who benefits more, Democrats or Republicans? Why? Graham, starting with you.
Well, absolutely Republicans, without a question, and more to the point, Trump himself. And as for why, Lisa, we don't have enough time.
All right, Sarah.
Trump won everything. He won Iowa. So Trump.
How did he win Iowa?
How did he win Iowa? He didn't even have to be there. Heck, in 30 minutes, they had 97% of their caucus voters voting for him. The Democrats, they lost that big time.
Tim, good week for the Democrats or Republicans? What say you?
Easiest question I've had in a while. Trifecta for the Republicans. The Iowa meltdown on Monday, a triumphant State of the Union on Tuesday, a Senate acquittal on Wednesday. Doesn't get any better than that.
All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much, Sarah, Tim, and Graham. And remember to tune in to libertynation.com for some fine writing, excellent political analysis, and a whole lot of fun. Thanks very much. I'm Lisa K. Donner. Have a nice day.
Truth is making a comeback.